Hello. So today we're going to be talking about a very interesting pricing strategy known as prestige pricing, also known as premium pricing. So the strategy is used by a lot of different companies, varying from Nike to Rolex to Bentley to Ralph Lauren. So we see it in clothing, we see it in accessories, we see it in cars, we see it pretty much everywhere, but it's interesting how different companies use it. So the basics of prestige pricing basically implies that the brand or the company is keeping the price of one of their products or services artificially high in order to encourage favorable perceptions among buyers based solely on that high price. So we see that this strategy is actually making consumers more price insensitive, so they care less about the price when this strategy is put in place. Basically, because this high price kind of acts as like a signaling function where they kind of think, well, I must be important, I must be special because I can afford these things and you guys can't. And that kind of gets in place in their mind when they see these high prices. It also just implies general rarity and scarcity because of this higher value. Obviously, less people are going to have it. So you're going to be more unique, you're going to be more different because it's not like every other person you know is going to have this. So obviously, this type of strategy has its fair share of advantages. This would include very high profit margins, also creating pretty tough barriers of entry for competitors, as well as just increasing the overall brand value for these company products through these high prices. So today I wanted to focus in on Rolex because I feel like it's so infamously known for having extremely expensive, luxurious, crazy watches. But kind of makes you think about it. Does this like 100,000 watch actually cost that much to make? No, probably not. We've seen that Rolex watches can range anywhere from the starter price at around 5,000 up to $14.8 million for a watch. Yes, that tells time on your wrist. Yes. But do these Rolex watches have more features, more technology? What are we missing here? I feel like there must be something else. No. I mean, I could go to the store right now and get a Timex watch for about $28-$30, and it would probably do about the same exact thing. Welcome to prestige pricing. This is the whole point. So the value that we see here is in the brand and what the brand says about the person wearing it. So if you can afford a Rolex, obviously you're doing something right. And the people with Rolexes on their wrist want everyone else around them to know that they're doing something right. And that's why they're buying it. They're buying it for the image. They're buying for what it tells everyone around them, who they are as a person and how successful they are. Strategies like this obviously have competitive advantages. They can create this perception that the products that they have are at a much higher value than competing products just because the prices are higher. So they have this added value over their competitors because of their pricing, solely because of their pricing. Because people, if you make your prices higher, people are going to be like, yeah, that must mean that the quality, that must mean that everything is worth the price. People believe it. So I wanted to go into just the general price range of Rolex watches because it does vary quite a bit. Just the basic beginner watch is still a steep 5,000, so it's still very, very expensive. But as mentioned, we can go up to 14 million. So we kind of have a whole broad range here. So some of their basic models, we're looking at the Oyster that's their base model for about 5,000. Their Datejust is around 9,000. So those are, as they put it, the beginner starter watches. And then we move up to brands like the Sky Dweller, which is around $15,000. Moving up more to the Cellini, which is around $27,000. The Pearl Master, which can be up to 100 grand. And then eventually we'll get to the Paul Newman's Rolex Cosmograph Daytona, which is $14.8 million. So we do have a broad range here, and some of their different brands, they have different styles below each of those brands. So those have different price points. It all really depends. So I'm going to go into kind of how Rolex generally kind of developed and decided to implement this strategy, and overall how brands develop and implement this strategy as a whole. So first off, Rolex had to become a premium provider. What this means is that they had to identify key features that would be considered high-end on the value scale and highlight these crucial elements in all of their marketing. They're not going to be offering a basic service level or baseline product. Everything they have needs to be special, and they're going to show that to you. So moving into number two, basically they have to define their value. So they're going to basically explain to the customers why their prices are higher, um, and also explain the difference. If other competitors' prices are lower, they're going to explain why, and why why Rolex's prices are worth it, why they're so valuable. They're never hiding their prices from anyone. They're right out in the open, but they're going to explain that value to their customers, and they do so relentlessly on their websites, we can see, and in their marketing. And the next step would just be to go the extra mile. So we see that Rolex really does this with their customer service and basically everything they do. Of course, they have friendly employees, but not only that, but their employees are constantly looking at what their customers are doing, constantly aware of their customers' needs, anticipating them, and always getting what's best for them. So they really want to be a part of this experience, a part of this purchase. Next step would be to never sacrifice the price, even when times are tough. As we've seen with Rolex and other companies, the higher price it goes, the more demand they get. So reducing the prices would really only hurt them. Even when times are tough, they really just have to weather that storm and continuously explain why this Rolex is a good investment and why it's going to add value to them, even when things aren't the greatest. And another thing that Rolex has done is have some flexibility for extremely loyal customers and long-time customers. The next step would be kind of going off of number 4 would just be not to play the lowest price game. Especially for Rolex, they're kind of the price setters in this market. They're not going to change or lower their prices just because someone else does. They carved out a distinctive market by not discounting their products, so it would actually hurt them if they try to lower them because of their competitors. So they just have to keep steady and hold on to those prices. And finally, it would just be overall that Rolex has to continue to project financial stability. Obviously, customers buying from them want to know that this company is going to be here for the long haul and that they're a successful company. So just promoting that and instilling that in all of their consumers' minds is super important for them. So I wanted to talk about next 3 main characteristics that I've seen with Rolex and that I see a lot with just the prestige pricing strategy in general with companies that I think is really interesting to talk about. So the first would be scarcity. So as we've seen with Rolex, they have this insane demand, and a lot of times this causes a lot more shortages. Whether they're real shortages or artificial shortages, more and more people want to get their hands on these watches as fast as they can, which just keeps increasing demand, and that allows them to have these extremely high prices. Another reason for this pricing strategy would be benign envy. Basically, everyone wants to emulate this person who has this amazing Rolex watch and their lifestyle and everything that they have. So the desire to have what the other person has brings out a lot of motivation to work harder to get there. So I think this benign envy really causes people to want to work harder and want to work up to those prices and get there in their life because it's this status symbol of success. The next thing would be a perceived risk, or like a social risk, because basically, the type of customers that are buying Rolex watches care a lot about their brand image and what they look like to other people. So obviously they don't want to wear a brand that's associated with a lower class symbol or not being as wealthy as they want to seem. So obviously they are going to buy something that's so well known for having an extreme amount of wealth. So this social risk kind of points them to buy something like Rolex. Lastly, I wanted to talk about just the 3 main most important components to pricing, as we've talked about a lot. Customers, cost, and competitors, the 3 C's. So when we're looking at Rolex customers, we see these rich, wealthy celebrities that want everyone else to know how rich they are. And Rolex's price demonstrates this. Rolex really targets the consumers that define their social status with the things that they own. So all of their customers are obsessed with premium priced products, but they don't really care about the actual quality or core value. It's the image that's associated with that product. So Rolex is free here to just kind of go crazy with their pricing. I mean, obviously, in some regard, they have to reel it in, and of course they have to explain it, but people aren't really looking for the fine details of their quality. They're looking for what it promotes, the value, the image, the success that they supposedly look like they have when they own a Rolex. It shows that you're financially strong, and people want that image associated with them, and that's why they buy Rolex. In terms of cost, we see Rolex has huge markup rate. With the research that I conducted, I looked at their base watch cost, which is usually around the cost to actually manufacture. I mean, the watch is about $750 to $1,000, and that base watch price is about $5,000 to $7,000. So that 500% markup is extremely high, and we can see that, this being their basic watch, the watches that are 50,000 to 500,000, that markup's gonna sometimes even be probably over 1,000 at this point because of the brand image associated with that watch. Oh well, this person wore that watch, then I have to have it, and up goes the price, like $5,000. All of these external factors play a huge role in the pricing of these watches, obviously. So when looking at their competitors, we see that Patek, Audemars, Vacheron are their main guys that they're going against. I think an important thing to note here, though, is that while some people who are more knowledgeable about the watch market may know these brands really well, I asked a lot of my friends if they knew any of these brands, and they knew none of them. But every single one of them knew Rolex. And while a lot of my friends aren't too into, I would say, luxury products or products that use this type of prestige premium pricing, they all still knew what Rolex was. And that cost a lot. That's a huge point of revenue for them. Just that high brand judgment, that high brand awareness is huge for them. Rolex is iconic in the sense that we hear it rapped about in songs. We see famous people wearing their watches all the time. We see them talked about and worn in movies. We see it everywhere, and that comes at a huge value. I feel like Rolex is also, like I talked about earlier, is a price setter in the market, so they have that advantage over their competitors. But they also just have that image of being not only high quality and luxurious, but just a status symbol. Like, if you have a Rolex, you have made it. And with these other brands, well, of course, they're extremely nice and high quality. I think they're more focused on that quality and the core values aspect rather than this brand image of being successful and wealthy and well off and doing great things. I think it's interesting to look at this type of strategy because I think so many people assume that what things price directly correlates to what things cost, but that could be farther from the truth for a lot of these brands. And I'm not to say that Rolex doesn't have high quality. Of course, they're high quality, but the markup prices that they have on a lot of their watches is crazy. So it's really interesting to hear that a lot of people just don't even think about that or realize that. So that's why I chose to use this as my topic, and I hope you enjoyed it. So as for the pricing, I actually collected most of the prices off of the Rolex website itself, but some of the prices, as you can see on the Rolex website, you have to call in or ask to get those prices. So I took a range of different websites and got the estimate from about, I would say, like 5 to 6 different websites to get a fair price for all the watches mentioned before. As for the cost, obviously, those aren't public knowledge from Rolex itself. So a lot of those I got from researching different websites that talk about Rolex as a company, also past employers that may have spoke to some of the manufacturing costs to get those numbers and get those markup cost percentages.